Coming up on this week's episode, we have BSD news, tidbits, and articles out the wazoo to share. Also, be sure to stick around for our interview with Brandon Mercer as he tells us about OpenBSD being used in the healthcare industry. BSD Now, episode 111, the Xenocratic Oath, recorded October 14th, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to have you guys with us this week. We got a jam-packed episode, a lot of stuff to talk about, and I think more material than we've had in a long time, Alan.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe having those couple weeks off where your Euro helped, but we got a lot of catching up to do, so we are going to try and get right into it for you, because I guess next week, where are you heading? OpenZFS?
Yes, the OpenZFS Developer Summit.
Nice. Where's that at? Bay Area?
Yeah, it's in San Francisco at the Children's Creativity Museum or some interesting venue.
Okay. Is that an invite-only thing, or can people...
No, anybody can sign up. I
Well,
think
if
there's a
you're in the
couple
Bay
slots
Area.
left. They had a cap on how many people they could fit. But.
Okay. Well, if you're in the Bay Area, try and get signed up right away so you can get into that.
Mm-hmm.
Go meet Alan and have some fun talking all things ZFS. Is that a one-day event, or is it...
It's a 1 day of presentations and talks and so on, and then the second day is all a hackathon with prizes for the coolest projects.
Ooh.
That's an idea we need at our dev summits. Is actually,
Yes.
We usually have at least 2 days, and one of them we should keep like with the dev summit, like we do with the talks. But one of them should be a hackathon with like prizes for the coolest working prototype and stuff.
That would be really cool. We should get some sponsors to donate things to give away, like free NAS minis and little Netgate routers.
That's what they did for OpenZFS. So yeah, maybe we can learn some interesting things from them.
That would be really cool. Anyway, okay, more fun stuff to look forward to in future conferences. Okay, but we got to get into your news because we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. So first up, a big release announcement. It looks like NetBSD 7.0 has officially landed, and this is a big one. Lots of new stuff. So we'll just kind of go through the list of some of the highlights here. But of course, the DRM KMS support has been updated, so now they have accelerated graphics using the modern Intel and Radeon devices.
Yes,
looks
so
like
this is up to Linux 3.15, which isn't the newest, but is quite new.
Pretty darn close.
Yeah.
That's pretty darn close. Also, it looks like multi-processor ARM support has been added, which is always neat, and support for a bunch of new ARM boards, including the Raspberry Pi 2 and the BeagleBone Black. So
but I also see BeagleBoard, Odroid C1, the Kobo Touch, which is interesting to put it on like an ebook type thing, right? QB Truck, Banana Pi, Mirabox, lots and lots of different devices because this is NetBSD after all.
Yeah, that's right. It runs on anything with a processor pretty much.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. So yeah, lots of neat stuff. And of course, we'll have to have you go through the list here, Alan, but it looks like some of their new PF improvements have gone
so
in
this
as well.
is NPF, the NetBSD packet filter. The first one was they have the BPF, which is the Berkeley packet filter, which is how you write rules for like TCP dump. Now has just-in-time compilation by default, so this means that it matches the rules faster and is easier to apply the rules to a high volume of traffic.
Nice.
It also, NPF now has support for dynamic rules, which is an important feature for it to have, so that it can do stateful firewall and so on. Support for static or stateless NAT. So this is NAT where it's basically a fixed mapping so that it doesn't have to keep track of dynamic rules, which can be really important if you're putting a server behind it where it's going to get a lot of traffic. I had a problem where, if you try to put your web server that's getting a lot of traffic behind NAT, you're going to end up with this state table full of stale sessions and so on until it fills up. So having that kind of stateless NAT will be very interesting. They also have support for IPv6 to IPv6 network prefix translation. So this is kind of like NAT, but for IPv6. And basically you're just saying, this certain network prefix is internal. And so all my firewall rules know that. When you want to go out to the internet, we're just going to change one part of that address to a different part of the address. Basically change the subnet to something different. And then that will be the internet version of everything. So it's kind of like the hybrid of having IPv6 and having real routable internet addresses, but at the same time providing the kind of network separation you expect from NAT. So that's cool. And then they have...
Is that kind of a standard feature? Other OSs do that now too?
I don't know how RFC 6296 sounds fairly new to me.
Okay.
So I don't know how many other places have that.
Cool.
And then it's not something I've ever looked at because most of my client machines aren't set up for v6 yet. And then they have support for CDB-based tables. And then separately, they use a perfect hashing algorithm, and this guarantees lock-free lookups in the firewall table. So that could be very interesting under heavy packet load.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that's not all the changes in 7.0. We still have a whole bunch of more stuff. It looks like multi-processor support has landed for the USB subsystem. Also, GPT support via their sysinstaller via the extended partitioning menu if you're looking for that. And we had talked about this in the past, but a Lua kernel scripting, which is an interesting idea. I wonder how that works now, or what, if people are using that in production or what for. But
well, I know that
cool.
it's something the ZFS people want, to be able to do ZFS channel programs as little scripts. So
That's right. So might we see this land in other places? That would be interesting. It looks like GCC has been bumped, so 4.8.4, which brings in support for C++11.
Yes, and then I see experimental support for the trim for SSDs in both WD, which is their disk driver, and FFS, which is their older version of UFS.
Okay.
So I don't know if on FreeBSD if UFS 1 actually supports trim or if it's only UFS 2.
That's a good question. I don't know. I've never tried it. CFS on everything now.
Exactly. And then when I went to the extended version, I also found that apparently NetBSD includes a Tetris game, and they've added color to the game. And also you can now press N to move a block down by one line if it fits.
Well, it's the little things that matter, right? Can you play it during the install, though? That is the question, right?
I imagine the NetBSD install is so fast that you wouldn't actually be able to get through a game of Tetris.
If you can clear a line, you're doing good, right? Okay, well, next up, we got some Cloudflare information here. It looks like they've developed an interesting new netmap feature. So tell us a little bit about this here, Alan, about specifically what they're doing that's unique with netmap.
Right, so normally when you enable netmap, it takes over the entire network card. And means that all the packets go into the netmap driver and user space rather than into the kernel. And so basically nothing else gets those packets. So it's very nice for network testing because you can it allows you to generate packets really quickly and test them and receive them and so on. But it doesn't really work when you want to do things in the kernel with the packets and so on. So Cloudflare has developed a new feature that allows for just one queue from the NIC. So server type NICs will have multiple queues, so that each one can be pinned to a different processor and you get more performance out of it. Normally, so with the new code that Cloudflare developed allows you to have all but one of the queues stay in the kernel, and then just say this one queue, number 4, will now go to netmap.
Okay.
And then, so basically to do that, all they did was change the netmap open API to allow you to specify, instead of just netmap : IGB0, you just add, I think it's dash or tilde, and then the queue number. And then it only binds to that one queue number. Then you just have to modify either your receive size scaling or your hashing or whatever's distributing the incoming packets across the queues, and tell it don't put anything into queue 4. Right? So all the packets now will go to the remaining queues that go to the kernel, and nothing goes to this queue number 4 that goes to netmap. Then you just, they've developed under Linux, so you use ETH tool and say, float type UDP4 with a destination port of 53 should go to queue number 4.
Okay.
So now all your packets come in and go to the kernel as normal, but if it's a UDP IP4 packet for DNS, then it goes to netmap. And then they have their basically firewall running on that queue number 4 in netmap that's going to filter out all the bad requests and basically the DNS amplification attack, and then only forward the good packets through back into the kernel to actually arrive at the DNS server.
Oh, interesting. So you mentioned here too, there's no tool like this yet to accomplish the same thing under FreeBSD, like the ETH tool.
Right. You can't currently set, which queues get used for stuff, and or just say, a certain flow should go to a certain queue. So that's something that we will have to develop so that we can have that. But this could be really interesting. Although I wonder if you could actually get even more specific by using something like IPFW netmap, which is a netmap version of IPFW designed to be fast. So the packets, maybe you would direct all flows into some of the queues that would go into IPFW. Then IPFW would classify them and decide which ones will go into a different netmap queue or something, or which ones will actually end up looping back into the kernel.
Interesting. Yeah, that could be really interesting.
Because, maybe you want your rules to be more than just, if the destination port is 53. Or
you can be a lot more complex with it.
Yeah, and you might actually get to the point where by default incoming traffic goes into netmap to get processed through some kind of attack filter. Then once you've established a session or something, once your machine is trusted, or maybe just your session is trusted, then you get to go directly into the kernel instead and go around the netmap firewall or something. So basically a stateful firewall where all the traffic gets shunted off into netmap, and then once you're an established flow that's not determined to be evil, then you get your flow goes directly into the kernel. But currently, the way ETH tool works, I don't think that it's expressive enough. But at the same time, I don't know if you want to be trying to look that deeply into each packet before it hits, before you decide whether it's going into the kernel or netmap, right? It might not be quite that possible. But it's definitely interesting work. And Luigi posted a bit about it on the FreeBSD mailing lists as well, saying how we need a tool like ETH tool to be able to do this.
Well, I'm sure that'll be the inspiration. Somebody will drop one on us here in the near future, and of course, we'll let you know when that occurs. Okay, well, next up, we have some OpenBSD news. So this happened actually a couple weeks ago. We were out of town, but there's been a nice series of articles over at the Register in the UK talking about setting up your own OpenBSD-based mail server, which is actually a really detailed, complete article. I was really quite pleased to read through this, but just a great write-up talking about, everything from the hardware down to this is actually the nitty-gritty how we set up the software, and it's in 3 parts, so it's a little lengthy, but if you have the time, it's definitely worth your read. In the article, they talk about for their mail server, they used a little mini PC, an Acer Revo 1, which is just a little 200-poundish price server. I think it's about the size of a large coffee cup, right? Good little mini mailbox, but it does walk through. It looks like they're using Postfix in this setup here for email and Dovecot. And then in the final segment, they also talk about details of setting up your spam filtering and then even tacking on antivirus scanning as well. And again, all done on OpenBSD 5.7. So if that's been something that's been in your hopper of things you wanted to do, this is a great place to get started, and just go ahead and follow the directions here. And it pretty much will get you a great system set up at the end with gray listing and everything.
Yeah, it's all 3 parts there. Very good.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. Pretty nice. Yeah, I was pleased to see that. The Register did a really good job on that.
And then separately, they have another story here on actually how to get started with OpenBSD's Uefi bootloader.
Okay. Well, that's not the Register. It's a different blog post. It's just another OpenBSD article. But I know we've talked about OpenBSD has landed UEFI support, and you've heard us mention that. But we now have a nice blog post which will take you through all the instructions on how to get that set up. It's pretty simple. We're talking only a couple minutes at most. Just your usual suspects of some fdisk commands to create the fat EFI partition, putting the right file in the right location. But as a bonus, he even gives you some instructions on how to enable the frame buffer driver. So if you're on a newer laptop or something without the newest Intel video support, and in his example, he's using a ThinkPad X250, he'll show you how to get better video than just using the plain old Visa driver. So yeah, you want to check that out. Some cool OpenBSD tutorials this week.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's this next tutorial? This one's a little wild here, Alan. Something about building a 10 million packet per second FreeBSD-based router.
Yes. So this is from Olivier of the BSD router project. And using work done by some other people in a project branch in FreeBSD, he's now managed to hit the mythical 10 million packets per second using a FreeBSD router.
Okay.
So he's got an HP ProLiant DL360P Gen 8, which is basically an 8-core Xeon E5 2650. and a quad port 10 gigabit Chelseo TS540 CR NIC. And then he says, so first thing you do is go in there and disable hyperthreading because it causes weirdness in the benchmarks, and get to work on it. So he did some benchmarks comparing, what happens if you use different numbers of queues. And we saw that on FreeBSD 10.2, after 4, it tends to trend down badly. And
so
it's like, that's not what we wanted.
No, not at all.
So then he looks at the setup and switches to using, here he has a comparison of the blue line is FreeBSD 10.2. The green line is FreeBSD head as of a couple of weeks ago. And then the red line at the top is the project's routing branch, which has a bunch of improvements to the code for routing in FreeBSD. And now you see that all of a sudden, with 4 queues, you get the nice high speed, and then it turns down a little bit, but then you get to hold that as you scale up to 8 queues, as opposed to trending down quite badly like it did in the previous code.
Oh, that's cool. Wonder if that'll land in current here at some point once more people get eyes on that.
Then he went and did the same thing, but disabled the harvesting of random data from the network card, which is quite a bit of extra work that the system does for every packet. And when you're doing 10 million packets a second, that's a lot. So now you see the green line is that we just saw, the routing branch. The red line is now the routing branch with harvesting disabled for Ethernet and the interface. And now all of a sudden, with 8 queues, that red line manages to hit just shy of 10 million packets per second.
Nice.
And you can see that the interesting thing is that it makes no difference on regular FreeBSD head. The limit is some other thing. So that's why, that random harvest is set that way by default, is because, when they did the comparison back when they set it up, it didn't make a difference. But now it turns out that with the routing branch, enough other problems have got out of the way that's now the bottleneck.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And then he goes on to actually compare it.
Different firewalls.
To compare fast forwarding of packets. You can see there you got your 9.5 million, or the green is the 1.5 you get with FreeBSD head, or blue is like 1.2 you get with 10.2. Then he compares those with using a stateful IPFW and a stateful PF firewall. And so
looks like IPFW's kicking butt here.
Yeah. And then so on this side of the scale, you see is the number of packets per second. So all of a sudden, if you use the routing branch, you went from 9.5 to about 5.5 million packets per second if you're using IPFW. But the interesting thing is, if you then look at this side of the scale, it's what that number of packets per second would translate to on the standard mix of packet sizes you would see on the internet. It would be over 15 gigabits per second.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
Wow.
So even PF down here is not that shy. It's like 8 gigabits per second, which is probably good enough if you're doing a stateful firewall, right?
Sure. That's pretty cool. Well, also at the bottom of the blog post here, he has some links. If you want to play with this, he's actually rolled some images for you, USB images.
Yep.
So you can grab the, basically what he used to do the benchmarks. He said, if you want to try and reach the mythical 10 million packets per second, he said you just need a little bit more powerful CPU. So if you have something laying around that's a little bit quicker, you might be able to show us the benchmark where you finally break through that barrier. But that's really cool.
Yeah, we've been, he actually experimented very similar setup on 2 machines that I just bought from IX. And they have the Intel NIC instead of the Chelseo, which isn't quite as fast currently. And we hit about 5.7 million packets per second on a slower CPU than what he was using.
Okay, nice. Well, cool. Well, that wraps up our news for the week, but we are going to do an interview here in just a moment with Brandon Mercer, so you'll have to stick around for that. But before we do, we want to mention our first sponsor this week, which is going to be DigitalOcean, and of course the website for that, digitalocean.com, where you can go get signed up and start making droplets right now before we even get into the interview. You could have your droplets spun up and running and doing stuff. And the best part is FreeBSD. Is it FreeBSD 10.2, I believe? Now, when are we going to get some 11 images in there? That'd be
interesting. Well, because you have the console, you can upgrade your to 11. And
That's
also,
right.
they just introduced a new Canadian data center. So you can
Okay.
now locate your servers in Toronto in addition to, was it San Francisco, New York,
Singapore, London.
Singapore, London, and Germany.
Okay. Yeah, that's really cool. DigitalOcean makes it super simple, and of course, a nice API is included as well. So if you don't want to do it through your web browser or need to programmatically, spin up VMs, tear them down, etc., you can do that. DigitalOcean has that all integrated and ready to go for you.
Yep.
And of course, we need to mention the coupon code. So FreeBSD Now, you need to use that. That'll give you a $10 credit, which is basically good for running 2 months of their lower end VM, which is still backed by an SSD. So you can do a lot of neat stuff on that low end VM. And then of course, if you need more beef or horsepower, you can ramp it up.
Yep.
But definitely makes it easy for you to get set up, and upgrading it's not that difficult either. Joined now by Brandon Mercer, an OpenBSD slacker/developer, is here to talk to us about OpenBSD in the healthcare industry, which might be surprising if you didn't know about that. But first of all, thank you so much for being on the show today, Brandon. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem at all, man. And I was excited to hear you come on and talk about this. But before we get into the actual OpenBSD side of things, first give us a little bit about yourself, your history. How did you first hear about BSD and get into it?
Well, I think it was back in college. I was actually studying engineering, and my roommates and a few people on the hall were all doing various computer science things. And so they were always writing stuff, software, and I was trying to make my CAD program work a little bit better. But we started gaming together, and I started to look at hardware and started to look at various things. And I got introduced to Linux through all that. And then that kind of led me down the path of Unixes and what those are. And someone said, oh, if you want to run something really nice, it's OpenBSD, and it's really secure, focused on security. And I don't know what appealed to me about that, but I was interested in it. So I started to play with it in college and did some installs and just looked at what it was capable of. And at the time, I was just kind of getting my feet wet. And then after college, I was looking for work, and the engineering stuff was pretty dry. And so I wound up working in technical fields. The little bit that I had played around with in college, I did a little bit of consulting here and there for some companies. And one day I was in there doing some miscellaneous desktop support, and they had this Squid proxy. And the whole thing completely collapsed underneath them. And so he said, do whatever you have to do to get this online. So I took an OpenBSD install and threw it on that Squid machine, and we weren't running Squid anymore, but I set up PF and was, filtering packets and getting things to the internet. And the next day, the guy came in and he said, this thing has never performed this well. It's never worked this well. And we have, 25 or 35 users. I just couldn't imagine it working without a proxy in front of it. And I said, yeah, I put OpenBSD on there and started routing packets, and he was really happy. And it kind of grew from there to, we started to deploy some public-facing web applications. And so we were using OpenBSD both for the firewall and for the application server to host that. And one of the big things that happened that really made my boss at the time happy was we had this AS400, and we were using it for an application. And one day, the certs expired, and the clients were complaining and stuff. So I kind of threw this little Java application that I had written in front of it and started letting the users log into this replacement that I'd been working on. And it performed phenomenally. And like our big clients started calling in, they're like, whoever did this, it doesn't take 90 seconds to log in anymore. I can look at my account quickly. And yeah, so we rolled out a bunch of BSD machines, and we had, probably a dozen different servers that were, filtering packets and, serving up applications. And at the time, I thought, man, this stuff just works, and I really enjoyed it. And I really thought that I wanted to be security focused. And, so that was my exposure to OpenBSD and just into systems in general. It was all self-taught and kind of learned by doing, which is a scary way to do things, I think, now. But at the time, it's what I did.
Cool. So how did you segue that into being an OpenBSD developer?
Yeah, so that was back in the early 2000s, and I was really enjoyed working with OpenBSD, and I was still playing with Linux at the time, and we had some Lotus Notes installs, and Lotus Notes didn't run on OpenBSD, which was a feature, and so I just kept using it more and more and more, and then I started to get interested in like hacking on hardware. I had kind of progressed from doing sysadmin stuff to writing some applications in higher level languages, and then I wanted to learn how to do lower level stuff, and it really lent itself well to that. I could grab the source code, and I could build things and play around with things really easily. The documentation was clear, the code was easy to read, and so I just started to learn and learn and learn and practice things. And then, so I did that for a long time and really messed up a lot of stuff and didn't really make any contributions, but you learn about the community and you learn about what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But then I had a little Panda board, and the Panda board was cool to me because it was this really low power ARM system. And I thought that was great because I was trying to play around with some monitoring for some wind and solar equipment. And it didn't make a lot of sense to make 45 watts of power and then spend 35 watts of power to run the machine to monitor it.
Sure.
And so it had Linux on it at the time, and I remember just having fits with Linux running on it. I don't know, I had learned OpenBSD and I knew it well enough that Linux was causing me pain and causing me grief. And I said, you know, I should try and make OpenBSD run on this thing. So I have almost no hardware experience, no kernel experience, and I really just went in and started reading code. And at the time, there was an effort happening to make the Beagle board work on OpenBSD, which was an OMAP 3 family, and then the Panda board was an OMAP 4 family. And so there was overlap between the two, and so I started like examining the boot blocks to see what it took to bring hardware online. And a lot of fiddling and a lot of reading code and a lot of just experimenting to figure out how things worked. Mm-hmm. And then I was talking a little bit with some other developers. Dale Ron was very helpful to me. I said, hey, how do we do this kind of thing? And he'd send me an email. And really, it was fantastic because I could go in there and read code, and there was no magic and no crazy things, but I could see what was happening. And the one day, I'd spent weeks and weeks on this. Really, I just needed to set up the memory configuration and the console address. And all of a sudden, the thing started to boot, and I saw the copyright. And I was really, really blown away that I was able to do that. And then there was like a time period that kind of lagged, where what I had done wasn't really appropriate. I had made a complete copy of the Beagle port and just hacked it up to do what I wanted to do for Panda, but you know that's not really sensible. You can't just copy an entire source tree every time you want to support a new ARM board because there's 100 million of them every week.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think Dale and some other people were working on unifying the ARM boot blocks a little bit, and you know they took my work and whatever. So I don't know. I think it was like a month or something, and I didn't really pay much attention to it. But then Peter Hessler asked me. He said, "Hey, you know, you want to come to a hackathon?" And I thought that was crazy. And of course, I wanted to. And when I got there, there was a whole bunch of big diffs floating around for this ARM stuff that people had been working on. And I don't know. It's been a few years, and honestly, that stuff is not really ingrained in my head. But I was able to get the Panda board booting into userland during that hackathon.
Okay.
So it was based on other people's work, and you know, a lot of help from other people who were very excited about seeing a new platform come up. And you know, just able to read code and able to figure things out. I mean, I'd written software for a long time before that, so you know, there were coding practices and things that I understood, but I didn't write C every day, and I still don't write C every day. So that's kind of a a frustrating point for me when I have to wrap my head around compilers and what is this make system doing and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's how I got my account and how I started working on OpenBSD. And I really have not been too active lately, and it's just because of life, and that's kind of unfortunate. But I have a stack of machines sitting here next to me that I'm slowly but surely getting the ARM stuff working on, because I don't have any more hardware that ARM hardware that runs OpenBSD right now, which is kind of unfortunate. So
sure, cool. Okay, well, we're going to be talking a little about the healthcare industry, and I know typically when we think of hospitals and different healthcare facilities, their IT departments might be understaffed or lacking in resources. Maybe they're even running really old hardware like Windows XP or 2000. Is that typical what you see, or is that really just a stereotype?
I think it's a little bit more common than it ought to be, if I could put that eloquently. It's unfortunate because the software that is the software industry is driven by the demand, and so you have an accounting department for a healthcare industry, and not too many people write software for that, and so the software doesn't get maintained. It only runs on Windows XP. There's still Windows 2000 installs running production processes, and yeah, it is kind of a sad state of affairs in general, but there's a lot of improvement happening right now, especially with like the facility side, the hospitals and the doctor's offices. Where I work is the back office stuff, so we deal with all the sensitive data, and I think that is an area that again is improving, and there's a lot of it's easy to innovate there because it's all low-hanging fruit. It's all easy to do, and so that's the space that I'm in. And so, we're probably, I won't say like we're one of the leaders in, innovating technology and pressing the forefront in what's possible, but we're definitely doing a good job of it. And my boss is really receptive to it. He has been very supportive of some choices and some advocations that I've made to do things a little bit differently. And so, yeah, the perception is accurate, and the good news is that it's improving. And I'm speaking generally for healthcare in the United States.
Okay.
Cool. So what exactly are you making use of OpenBSD for that area? And, what is it being used for, and what's it doing?
Yeah, right now we process EDI files, which are basically claim information and pharmaceutical information, eligibility, and things like that. We get sent that information. We have to process it, persist it to a database, do some translations so our claim system can load it properly, and some other magic that happens in there. And then we have to do the same thing on the way back out. So OpenBSD is being used in that capacity. We run those applications on OpenBSD. The web applications run on OpenBSD. And we run our database on OpenBSD, and it works well. It's very performant. A lot of people shy away from that. I think it's kind of discouraging to see such a great platform, and it's easy to administer, and things just work well on it, and it has such great support, and people shy away from it because another platform might do another 10% better or something goofy when they don't even need that. But yeah, we run our databases on it, and it works great, and it's worked well for us.
Cool. So it's mostly like just information interchange, like taking the data in one format, storing it, and then converting it to this different format, and then back, and making different parts work together.
Yep, that's exactly right. And we also have some scheduling and automation stuff that runs on there as well. But yeah, for the most part, that's exactly what it is.
Cool.
Okay. So, of course, OpenBSD is not really known for like a long-term supported enterprise-y release. We're going to backport this to 8 years ago or whatever. But how do you actually make that work in your industry?
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. I think the long-term support for me is a little bit overplayed. I think that I would like to see vendors do things that the longer you go without an update, the longer you go without upgrading your software, the more disruptive it is when you do actually need to upgrade that software.
Sure.
And so I actually like that we have a regular release cycle and it's sooner rather than later. And we have an install at work right now that's been out there for 7 years. I actually looked at the source code the other day, and the application is a little more than 7 years old, and that machine has not been upgraded in that long, which is sad and unfortunate. But it's one of those things that fits that long-term support model. It's work, so we don't upgrade it. And I think that if we did a real close audit of that thing, we'd be a little disappointed with some of the things that we're still living in there. It's like not cleaning out your fridge is kind of how I look at long-term support when it comes to software.
Sure.
But yeah, I actually like to track snapshots at work, and that way I kind of keep a good feel for what's going on before the upgrade happens. We have some machines that we upgrade frequently, and then some machines that we upgrade on a little bit slower schedule just because it's more work and it doesn't really need to happen as much. So it helps to track those snapshots and learn what's changing. And if you follow the documentation on the website, it's really good about telling you, hey, there's some important things you need to pay attention for, and keep you apprised of what's going on. And honestly, my experience with long-term support for things like Linux is just it's not been what I want it to be. There's a ton of vulnerabilities, there's a ton of patches. So even though you're not upgrading a major release, you're still patching all the time anyway. And it's really, in my mind, no different. So,
just as disruptive.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You still have to test your software. You still have to test your applications. And so I don't know that there's an advantage in my mind, but I know that some people put an emphasis on it. And yeah.
Yeah, but I think you maybe have a point there about the change management and stuff. You still have to go through all that, even if you're running a long-term release, and all you're really gaining is that, the version of this, the version of Perl you have isn't going to change. It's like, well, that's not that helpful in the end, because...
Yeah, that's one of those things I kind of think about in the back of my head when you talk about that long-term support. Sometimes I think people want the long-term support so that they don't break things. And I think that a lot of vendors going forward, they say, hey, install this new thing. And it's like they introduce 7,000 regressions that you have to find the hard way. And so that's why people want a long-term support where you just patch. But I think that that's kind of a mask or a facade for people who don't want to write good quality software, and there's plenty of people who live under that. But really, when you're tracking OpenBSD, it's not a problem there. It just doesn't happen the same way.
Okay, time for our news roundup. But before we get to that, of course, we want to mention another sponsor this week, which is going to be IX Systems, where you can go to ixsystems.com/BSD Now, and of course, talk to those guys, but let them know that you heard it here on BSD Now, because of course we're huge IX fans. I mean, heck, I work there; it's my day job, so I don't mention that too often on the show because I try and keep it separate. But no, that's what I do, and a great group of guys there. And talking to them is fantastic, especially if you need to call them for the first time and you've got some new project, you're excited about it, and you're not quite sure what hardware to buy. Maybe you've gotten some quotes from some other bigger vendors and they're wanting to sell you all this and that. But when you call the IX sales guys, the cool thing is these guys are engineers. Like, you just tell them the problem. Like, yeah, we need to set up a mail server to handle this much load or storage or whatever it is. And they'll help you design a solution that best performs for the budget you have. That'll actually, accomplish the goal and the minimum amounts required. In other words, we need it to always perform at this level, no worse. So they can tell you, well, let's sink more money into that SSD so you have a good ZIL or whatever it is. They can figure that all out for you because they're experts in open source. Have you ordered anything new, Alan?
Not in the last couple of days. I'm still playing with the hardware I bought.
Well, in that case, yeah, Alan's using it for, is that all your systems now? Or
pretty much. All the machines we own that we bought in the last so many years.
Okay. Well, yeah, that can be yours too. And then you can set up your own little data center in your basement like Alan, so, which is definitely fun to see a whole rack of IX labels
Mm-hmm.
sitting there staring at you. So again, guys, go to ixsystems.com/BSD now and let them know that we sent you. Okay, news roundup this week. So first up, we got Nvidia. We don't talk about them a lot
Mm-hmm.
on the show, but looks like they've released some new beta drivers for FreeBSD, along with a new kernel module. So for those who don't know, if you're not a FreeBSD user, there are official Nvidia blobs available, and I know
It's
I've been
actually,
using those forever.
yeah, it's actually the same driver that goes to Windows.
Windows, yep. That's right. That's right. And it works really well. I remember it got SLI support like way back in the day before Linux could even dream of that and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done a good job keeping that up to date. And it seems like any new card you buy from Newegg or Amazon or whatever usually works within weeks.
Well, yeah,
as soon as they put the driver.
Yeah, the driver comes out on the same schedule as Windows does.
Yeah. So it's a good deal. But in this particular driver, they have a beta out. So they're asking people to test this. But specifically, it looks like it has a new kernel module called NVIDIA-mode set. While that sounds all exciting at first, it doesn't actually provide any new user visible functionality. So you don't get any new tools or commands to tweak things. However, this is going to be used as the basis for now kernel mode setting. So as the kernel requests different resolutions as a part of the direct rendering manager, this is the part of the NVIDIA driver that's going to handle that. So it's neat to see that they're catching up and adding that support.
It's going to be basically able to be used under the same framework that the Intel and Radeon drivers are. And so that'll simplify everything just working together. And it definitely allays my concern of, well, so we're getting the Intel and Radeon drivers updated to match up with the Linux ones, but what about the NVIDIA driver?
Is that going to break things?
As more and more things tend to depend on this DRM stuff, how are we going to solve that for NVIDIA? And NVIDIA is going to solve it for us.
Yep, it sounds like they have. So in addition, this beta adds a couple new things as well. We have 805A support and 960A NVIDIA cards now have support. Yep. So if you're rocking one of those and you're waiting for a driver to do that, go ahead and grab one of those. And it also fixes some bugs. Looks like there was a memory leak found and some various regressions. So looks like the memory leak was after destroying GLX windows, which had context attached to it. And they fixed a regression that reduced OpenGL performance on a headless X system. So if you're in any of those situations, you'll want to do an update. And of course, it looks like some new OpenGL extensions.
Yep, commands and lots of interesting stuff.
Yeah. Oh, a new system memory map allocation for large allocations in the OpenGL driver as well. So I guess it looks like they allow you to allocate larger amounts of virtual address space. So yeah, some neat features, and hopefully this driver gets out of beta here soon and we can start rocking it.
Yep. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that catches up to the Intel drivers.
That's right. It
matches up with
Oh.
them.
Okay, well, next up, Midnight BSD. I know we've talked about this from time to time, but we messed this while Alan was out at Euro last couple weeks, but they came out with a new 0.7 release. And for those who don't know, Midnight BSD, it's I guess been a little while now since we've talked about them, but they are a desktop-focused FreeBSD 6.1 fork. So they've come a long way now with their new 0.7 release. It looks like, in particular, this release is focused primarily on stability, but it includes some important security fixes as well. So if you're on 0.6, it's probably time to upgrade. In addition, though, they've been cherry-picking a lot of different FreeBSD bits and backporting that into their system as well. So it looks like some base system updates. They've imported some important ZFS features, though, such as trim and LZ4 compression, which, yeah, you want those. So that's a big deal. In addition, one of the things that's different about Midnight BSD is they have their own ports and package system, mports. And so their system has gotten a whole slew of new updates with this release. It looks like they're clocking in at almost 2,000 packages now being available in their repo, including a work-in-progress version of GNOME 3. And they've added some features like automatic starting and stopping of services whenever you add or remove packages as well. And lastly, they do note that this will probably be their last 32-bit release, so they're going to be joining the rest of the club here with other projects that are going 64-bit only. Yep. So if you have some legacy hardware that's still only 32-bit, it might be time to think about upgrading if you're running a Midnight BSD. Okay, so this next one here is something you had here, Alan. Open source is a career path. Yes. So walk us through this.
So this was a panel that was held at the Association of Computer Machinery's Women Courage Conference in Uppsala, Sweden. It was the weekend before EuroBSDCon. And Drew Levine led a panel there consisting of Deb Goodin from the FreeBSD Foundation, Benedict Reuschling, who is my docs mentor and is a professor at a university in Germany, Dan Lengill, who's runs BSD Can and various other things, like fresh ports and so on, and then myself. And basically, we attempted to answer the question, why should you choose open source as your career path? And attempted to kind of provide a cross-section of different experiences, including, with Drew and Deb being a woman in the field, but also Benedict from what it means on the academic side of, if you want to do research or a thesis or whatever, why building that on top of open source has many advantages. It's like, if your thesis is about how to do this certain thing in an operating system, building it on an operating system that's real and works instead of, one of the kind of proto ones that they use for education, or having to write your own whole, simulation of an operating system just to see how these changes to the scheduler or the pager might work, and so on. And then Dan did the community side. What are the advantages to getting to know all these people and all that kind of stuff. And then myself with the business side of it, but also the community side with BSD Now and so on. But it was more the fact that I've never had a job that wasn't open source. And, I kind of had this weird path that have kind of never involved not doing open source.
Would it kill you a little to have to do some closed source now? Like
probably
after being open so long, right? A little part of your soul would die.
Yeah. But yeah, and so we answered a bunch of questions and introduced ourselves and so on, but also we took questions from the audience and plus some questions we wrote up ahead of time in case nobody had, there weren't as many questions as we were hoping. We went through that, and there's a whole video of it here. But I think one of the highlights was near the end, one of the students asked, why do open source projects still use old technologies like mailing lists and IRC instead of, new stuff like Slack? And Dan gave a great answer to that. That was basically like, well, if you think Slack is better, and set it up, and if it's better, all the new people will use it, and before long, that will be everybody. But yeah, that was very good. And
we use Slack for everything internally here, by the way. I enjoy it. It's nice.
Okay. And Drew was cursing it.
All right, Drew was cursing. I wish they had better clients because I'm running in a web browser at the moment. But I like the GitHub and Jenkins integration. It's pretty cool. Yeah. It's a lot easier to do that than with IRC. But just me.
And then also for this conference, the day before this panel, we had a booth at the career fair that they had. And actually, FreeBSD was the only open source project at the conference. The other exhibitors were Cisco, Facebook, Intel, Google, and Oracle.
Okay.
So it was, a little interesting. It's like, well, no, we don't have an internship to offer you, but if you, contribute to open source, you get to work on whatever you want to work on, and you get this body of work that, you can just point people to your GitHub page or whatever and be like, here's a bunch of stuff I did that other people are using, and you can look at the code and see, how nicely written it is, and why that's, a nice thing to have on your resume.
Okay.
And then...
So what's this? Dan gave another workshop?
Yeah, so then the day after this panel, Dan did a workshop where students went and they actually learned how to contribute to open source project. So he started with, a GitHub project he set up that just had some, documentation or something, and it had some incorrectly translated Swedish. And so the students or the people taking the workshop went through and sent pull requests to fix the typos or correct the translations or whatever and things like that, and basically got familiar with the tools and, how to get on IRC and talk to people about it, and how to submit patches and how to do pull requests on GitHub and all that kind of stuff that gets involved in actually doing it. And, going through it the first time with other people to talk to and a room full of people that are engaged in it. So when you're on the IRC, people are answering in real time, and kind of having that mentored experience to get you through the first time. So then when you go to do it, on the internet to some other project, it's not your first time, and it's much less daunting. So I'm hoping to see that workshop run at more places as well.
Okay.
And then here's a picture of the panel, and here's a picture of Dan teaching his workshop.
Great.
or not.
Cool, thanks, Alan. That looks like it was a neat pre-conference conference you did before.
And Groff was there. That was important.
Okay, so we're going to be doing feedback, but also we have a new little section I'm calling BSD Bits, where we're going to be going rapid fire through some different stories, which don't necessarily merit a full article in themselves, but we do want to pass the info along because it may be important to you.
Yeah, you might want to go read about them yourself if they hit you in the right way.
Yeah, we have all these links, and if this is something that applies to you, it might be like, oh, I've been waiting for that. So, yeah, that's why we want to bring you all these. But before we do get into that, see, that's what's called a tease, by the way. So we do have another sponsor to mention first this week, which is going to be Tarsnap, where you can go to tarsnap.com and download a client for just about anything under the sun and start doing your encrypted online backups. And the cool thing is, if you don't trust the whole download a binary client for anything under the sun bit, you can compile it yourself. He has the source code up there.
Yep.
So you can audit it, check it, make sure it's doing everything it's supposed to do and it complies with all the regulations and laws and everything you need to comply with. And then just start using it because you can build it yourself. You don't have to trust the binary up on his site, which is pretty darn cool. And getting set up's easy. It just takes a few minutes to set up an account. It's measured in pico dollars, so you will be spending very little, and everything's diffed before it's sent up. So as you do daily backups or whatever, you're only backing up the bits that have changed.
Yeah, I
which
think
is good.
My total archive has reached like a terabyte because of all the incremental changes or whatever, but I'm still paying like less than $0.25 a month.
Oh, geez.
Because it's only like 800 and something megabytes of data, but I'm uploading all of that. It's keeping a complete archive of all that twice a day, every day.
That's right. That's pretty cool. So again, guys, Tarsnap, there's no reason not to be doing backups. And if you're going to do it, let's do it right. Have it all encrypted before it leaves your box. So check it out, tarsnap.com. Okay, so we'll get into the new BSD Bits section here. So some of these things are a little older because, again, we missed a few things while we were out of town. But we do want to bring them to you in case you didn't see them either. So first up, NetBSD, it looks like, has had a package source freeze for their 2015 Q3 branch. So looks like that's probably already landed or just about to here soon. So keep an eye out for that. Next up, we have support for 802.11n has landed for Realtek USB drivers in FreeBSD, the if RSU driver. If you use one of those or have any of those Realteks, you may want to give that a try. That's going to be up in current, of course, and will be in 11.0.
Yes.
You want to do the next one? Here,
so Dragonfly has done initial Wayland and Weston ports.
Okay.
So this is an initial port of libwayland and the Weston reference compositor for Dragonfly. And currently Dragonfly specific because of the usage of the libdev attr for device enumeration. But that means Dragonfly is the first BSD to get Weston and Wayland support.
That's pretty cool. Being able to run your desktop without X.
I think currently they actually still require X. No X server.
It says only no X server.
Okay.
No.
Very
nice. You
nice.
need to just have the Intel driver or Radeon KMS driver, and then you can start using it. So I wonder if this is something the new Nvidia driver will allow us to do too, now that it has mode setting.
Exactly. This is
you can start running Wayland.
Yeah, I was worried that the Nvidia driver lacking this was going to run into problems like this, but it seems that Nvidia is on the job there. So that's good.
Well, I'm really jealous. I know QT's had support for Wayland for a while, so I'm already doing evil thoughts here of like, we could potentially not use X anymore. How cool is that? Anyway, we will bring that to you when that happens down the road. So
this one here is a debrief from Giles Shahad about the OpenSMTBD audit. So we covered the audit last week when they had that giant list of CVEs and bug fixes for OpenSMTBD. But now now that bit of work is over and they finally got caught up with that, they could write a post to their mailing list, and it's up here on the OpenBSD journal, kind of explaining what happened and how that went. And that audit's been going for quite a long time, and they talked about how while they did find quite a few bugs, most of them actually were mitigated by the various features of OpenBSD, like the stack smashing protection and the hardened malloc and the stack canary and all that kind of thing. But how there's more that they can learn, and that they're going to try to apply the lessons they learned from the audit to go forward as well.
Okay. So this next one here, it looks like FreeBSD has fixed some issues with PF under Xen with TSO. And we have a link here. It says there's going to be an errata coming out soon.
Yes.
So hopefully we'll see that here in the next few days.
Yeah, so that went in this morning and should be MFC to 10 in about a week once we're sure that it doesn't explode everything.
Sure. Doesn't break the thing.
Yeah, and then once it's in 10, there should be an errata notice so that people can apply that patch to their virtual machines that are having this problem. Because I know quite a few people were having issues with, using TSO under Xen, and they were getting invalid TCP checksums, and that would cause problems or packet loss or networking problems. And this will should solve that and improve reliability and performance. And FreeBSD being used on various cloud things like Amazon's EC2 and various other things. And I see this is sponsored by RootBSD, who also has an interest in people running FreeBSD and Xen.
Okay. Well, lastly, here we have Xenocratic, who we've had on the show before and talked about. They make their OpenServer X platform, which is based on FreeBSD 10, and basically it's the leftovers of SCO, right? So it allows you to run OpenServer applications on Xenocratic.
They bought or inherited the clients that are still using SCO and paying for support, and they're transitioning them all over to FreeBSD 10 with
Beehive.
Yeah, or running, if they have any leftover SCO apps that aren't ported to FreeBSD, then they run them with SCO in Beehive.
That's pretty cool. But it looks like they've issued a release here saying that they're funding the Hardened BSD project. So they've contributed, looks like $3,500 towards Hardened BSD and helping contribute to the work going on there that's happening. And so if you want to read the press release about that, we have a link to that here as well.
But Xenocratic is interested in seeing those security features make it into FreeBSD, and so they're supporting the Hardened BSD project.
Great. Okay, well, let's get into our feedback and questions now. So first up this week, we have Evan. He writes in and says, "Hey, love the show. It's been great for me as I ventured into this world from Windows and Linux sysadmins to now also including a FreeBSD sysadmin. He said, I'd like to suggest a possible tutorial for the show, and that is how to import patches from the ports SVN as well as installing older versions of ports. I currently have a problem where I'm stuck using Samba 4.1 as the Samba 4.2 port has a problem with databases NTPD and databases LDB, databases TDB, and TEvent, TALEC, etc. And he has a link to the bug number here as well in the FreeBSD ports tracker. So he says, it would be nice to know how to import patches like the one above to allow me to use and test and then contribute back with either positive or negative reports to the community whether the patch fixed it.
Yeah. So if you have an SVN checkout of the ports tree, just SVN patch and then the path to where you've saved the patch out of Bugzilla will apply the patch cleanly. Although where you run the command from has to be relative to where the patch is relative to. It's slightly annoying, but you can figure that out from looking at the first line of the patch. But yeah, we could do a tutorial on a little bit more about how to use SVN to roll back to, so that if you're tracking head, whether it's head of ports or head of the base tree, how to go back a couple of days in case somebody did something that's causing you issues and you need to get back online while you wait for them to fix it, and things like that. So yeah, we should do something like that.
Cool. Okay. Well, next up, we have Darren writes in. He's asking about NetFlow per jail using cloned interfaces. He said, hey guys, hope all is well with everyone. I have been messing around with NFS and NFS dump, NFS capd on FreeBSD 10.2 running within a jail using EasyJails. He has a link to the data. He says, the problem is while I'm able to add my jails on another server, the data is only being pulled on the physical interface, not the loopbacks which are assigned to each jail. I was wondering if there would be a way to get this working so I can see the data per jail, i.e. MX, WWW, NS1, and SIP instead of just the other hosts. He said, anyway, keep up the great work. You're awesome people. I sincerely hope to meet you one day. Well, you got to come out to a show. Find the closest one we're going to be at and come on out. That'll be fun.
Yeah. We need a little more detail on how your jails are actually set up. Like, what do these loopback interfaces look like? But you might be better off using like VLAN interfaces on a physical interface so that you actually get a virtual interface. Because basically when jail, when you assign it IP address, it basically inherits the network card that IP address is on. And then, well, I guess what it looks like the problem is here is he's using internal IP addresses, and then his firewall is converting them, and then so his NetFlow is only seeing it outside. The other option is something like vImage, where you actually have a networking stack in each jail so that they could have their own network card. But I don't know where his NetFlow collector is actually running either. But if somebody knows a good solution for this guy, write us in and let us know, and we'll cover it next week or the week after or whatever.
Okay. Sounds good.
But yeah,
last up.
Especially if you are using the jails to run other people's stuff, being able to have NetFlow reports on it would be quite useful.
Okay, lastly, we have a reply from episode last week from Jochen Buer. We were talking about FreeBSD on an HP Compact DC5850 and how it couldn't boot. And he says, hey, everyone, it seems like these problems are all HP related. I've also got an older HP workstation, and booting FreeBSD from USB is not possible there. The display just stays black and nothing happens. Booting various Linux from USB, on the other hand, is no problem. Best regards.
Yeah. So I saw the same thing at EuroBSDCon with Bernard Spill's laptop. And it would actually get to the BTX client or loader, but then would immediately reboot instead of hang. And I tried a bunch of different things, but none of them seemed to make any difference. I don't know what's going on there or what we could do to solve it.
Okay, well, somebody will come up with a loader fix, I'm sure, at some point that'll correct that. Okay, so as we wrap up the show this week, guys, we hope you enjoyed it, first of all. Look forward to next week's show with you all. But, of course, send your questions, comments, show ideas, or topics, or stories you want mentioned on the show to feedback@bsdnow.tv. We would appreciate that. It's the only place we monitor, so if you send something in IRC, I may or may not see it. But if you send it to the email address, we will be sure that one of us gets a chance to look at it.
Exactly.
So anyway, thanks for being with us this week on the show. We really appreciate it. We'll look forward to talking to you next week. And don't forget, Alan's going to be at the OpenZFS conference out in the Bay Area next week. So if you can make it out to that, I think there's still a couple slots left. So don't forget, get signed up.